Hi guys, this is the TCP bare bones client video for Linux and code blocks. And as always, we get started after the fade. So this is the plan for today. This is obviously a continuation on from the previous one where we did the bare bones TCP server in Linux. So we're going to be creating a socket. Let me just get control back to the virtual machine. I'm running Linux in a virtual machine, as you can probably tell by this little thing up here. So I'm going to create a socket, we're going to create a hint structure, and that's going to allow us to connect using that socket. So remember, the socket's just a reference that we use inside the program to reference the connection. That's the only reason we have a socket, is so that we can reference that. What we're actually doing is we're melding the local port and the local IP address with the remote IP address and the remote port. When we connect, we get some random port given to us, so we don't need to worry about assigning a port number on the client side. We only need to worry about it on the server side. Then we're going to enter a while loop. So the while loop is going to pause and wait for the user to enter some text. The user enters some text, which is going to be us, obviously, because we're writing this program, and then we're going to send that text to the server, wait for the response, and then display the response that we get back. And we're going to keep doing that until the user presses Control-C, and then at that point we're going to close the socket, tidy it up, and then close the program. And that's going to be about it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. So I'm going to do create new project, and again we're using code blocks for this. And I'm going to choose go and next, and I want to create this inside, come on, okay, let me just try that again. So I'm going to click next. Okay, let me close code blocks down for a second here. Sure, yeah. Okay, so let's put code blocks up here. So we had this one here. So let's fire that up again. Okay, so let's back to where we were. So we're going to go new project, console application, click on go, and we're going to click on next. Now we get C++. I think it was in debug. I think that was the reason why. And then click on next. And then where do we want to store that? We're going to call this BB bare bones TCP client. So bare bones TCP client, and that's going to put it in that location, which is good. And then we're going to click on next. All of this is fine. Click on finish, and it will, in a second, create a new project for us. So we can see that we have our project sources down here, and we have our main.tcp file, which is this one here. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to go back, and instead of typing out all of this stuff again, all these include files, I'm just going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it in here. And so that's going to give me the sort of bare bones start to that. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to cheat again. I'm going to go grab all this stuff, and I'm going to get rid of that and do Control V. Oops, sorry. Pressed the wrong sequence of keys there. So I'm going to paste that in there, and then I'm going to, what do we do there? Oh, I'm all fingers and thumbs today. Okay, what am I doing wrong there? And then I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to click on comment, and then hopefully that's not going to put it in as a block. I'm going to put it in as separate lines, which is good. Now you probably you can make it, you can actually make it out better on the recording than you can on here, so that's a good thing. Okay, so first things first, we're going to create a socket. Now our socket is just going to be a normal socket. That's all we're interested in. It's going to be an integer because that's what sockets are. Remember, sockets are just file descriptors. They're just there so that we have a reference to the communication port so we can send and receive data. That's all we create a socket for, is just for that reference. So we're going to say int socket equals socket. Let's not call it socket. Let's call it sock. And then we specify the type it is. So it's AF INET. It is a stream. So we're going to use TCP for this, and we're just going to put that as 0. We're going to have to check and make sure that's okay. So then we say if sock is equal to -1. Let's just return 1. So we want to bail out as quickly as possible from there. We don't want to continue with the program. If we can't create a socket, then there's no point in continuing with the program. So the next thing is we create a hint structure. Now the hint structure is, this is the information that we're going to use to connect to the server. So we need to know the port number. So the port is going to be 54,000. And the reason why I know it's 54,000 is because if we look down here, we have our port of 54,000 down here for our bare bones server that we created in the previous video, which is linked up there. And we also need to know the IP address. Now I'm going to use the loopback address. If you know the IP address of your machine, you can also use that as well. There may be some firewall restrictions, so your mileage may vary, so I'm going to use the loopback address. So string IP address equals 127.0.0.1, which basically means the local machine. So that is our sort of our variables, if you like, for the hint structure. Now the hint structure is going to be a socket address, and then we're going to use IN. Now sock address IN means it's going to be internet version IP address IPv4, which is the A.B.C.D type format. So this kind of address schema. And we're going to call that hint. And then we're going to fill in the various values. So hint dot, and this is going to be syn family. Except if I put that as socket address, that might work a little bit better. Family equals AF INET. Hint dot syn port equals, and then it's going to be htons port. And remember, we need to convert from whatever the host is to the network short. And then inet pton, and then we're specifying the address family again. So AF int inet even, and then the address, so that's IP address C string, and then the buffer. So this is where we want to put that. So we want to put that inside hint.syn address. So we're basically converting this string to a series of bytes, and that's what we put inside there. And that's created our hint structure for us. Now we want to connect to the internet. Well, we want to connect using the networking to the remote machine. And the way we use that is we use the connect keyword. Who knew? So let's call this connect result equals connect, and we're going to specify the file descriptor. So the file descriptor is our socket, so that's sock. It then asks for the hint structure. So that is, well, actually it needs to know the address of it. Now you notice that it says sock address, so we actually need to cast it as that. Sock address, and then the address of that structure, which is the hint structure, and then we need to give it the size of that. So we need to size of sock address int that there. Or we can shorten that, we can even just put in hint, it doesn't really matter. And again, if connect res equals -1, return 1. Okay, so we want to early out there as quickly as possible. However, if that has worked, we then want to enter the lines of text, send to the server, wait for the response, display the response. That's what we want to do. So the way we're going to do that is we're actually going to use a do loop rather than a while loop. So I'm going to say do, and let's just have this as while true just now. We're not going to have it as while true, or are we? Let's leave it as while true just now. So our while true there. So get enter lines of text. So let's do some setup first of all. So the first setup is let's go outside this while loop for just now. Actually, let me make this text a little bit bigger so that we can sort of see what we're doing. Should have done that at the start, sorry. Okay, so let's do char buff 4096, and then we're going to have string user input. So this is going to be where the user types in their values. So enter line of text. So we'll do cout, and let's just do a nice friendly arrow prompt, and then we'll do get line, and then we need to specify the stream. So that's going to be cin, and where it's going to go. So we then specify user input. And the reason why we use get line is so that we get the entire line. So if you, as soon as you press a white space with cin, then it just takes that input and then sends that. So we don't want to do that. We want to have an entire line of text. And now let me just tab that in a little bit to make it a little bit clearer what we're doing here. And then we want to send to the server. So to send to the server, we're just going to use send, which is what we used before. So we're going to do int send result equals send. And then what are we sending? Well, we're sending it across the socket again. We are sending the buffer, so that's going to be user input dot c string. The size of that buffer is going to be user input dot size plus 1, because a C string has got 0 tacked on at the end, and size, this function here, size, that only returns the length of the characters in the actual string. So if you put hello, HELLO, you only get 5, but we're really sending 6 because we have that trailing 0, so that's why we have that plus 1 there. And then we'll just put in 0 for flags there. And I'm going to put in here to do check if that failed. So I'm not going to bother with a check for failed just now, but then we want to wait for the response, which is the next line. So we want to say int bytes received equals receive, and again we want to receive in on that socket. The buffer where we want to put things is buff, and we want to specify the size 4096 and then 0. Now what we also want to do is we also want to use memset, and we're going to point to the buffer, so that's going to be the buff. The size of the buffer 4096, the character we want to fill it with, which is 0, and then the size, which is 4096. because we're just zeroing the buffer at that point. And then we want to display the response. So the response we're going to display is cout server, and then we're going to do string, just to make it a little bit tidy, buff, comma, bytes received. So just to tidy it up a bit, we're gonna put that there, and then we're gonna do /r/n, just to make it a little bit tidier. And then once that finishes, we go back up to the top there. So the next thing we need to do is close the socket, and the way we close the socket is we just do close sock, and that's it. That closes the connection. So whatever connection the socket had, it's now going to close there. So our send there, let's go back up to here, and then let's say if send res equals -1, cout could not send to server. Whoops. Continue. And so what this is going to do is, instead of sending it and then putting in that receiver, it's going to skip everything else after this and then just jump back up to here. So maybe there was a communication problem. You know, the server wasn't responding at that time, that kind of thing. So we don't want to kill our program. We just want to continue gracefully and then move on to the next input, which may or may not send successfully as well. I think that's it. I've got notes down here, but I think everything is done. Yeah, I think that's us. So the next thing that's going to be left here is we're going to build it and make sure everything runs. Where's the project? Actually, if you right click on here, you can just get to build. And if I bring this window up, I'm having so much luck with this. Where is it? Okay, I don't know what I've done. What did I do? I think the other issue is that I'm running in a virtual machine, and that really doesn't help it. And also I'm trying to run OBS at the same time, and OBS is like, I don't want to play with anyone else. So what gives? Why? What did I do? Maybe if I go to view windows, perspectives, code blocks minimal. No. Okay. Well, that didn't work. Perspectives, default. No. Okay, well, clearly I've broken something. Let's see if it built anyway. This writing under Unix or Linux or whatever is an let's see if it's worked. Okay, so if I go to source, cd barebones TCP, what's it called? TCP. cd barebones TCP server, cd bin, cd debug, and then I do barebones that will start the server. And so now if I go to window, new window, and I have these side by side, I can go back to that, back to that, back to that, and then I can go to barebones TCP client, bin, debug. Okay, so it did compile, despite the fact that there's no UI there. It did actually compile. So I'm going to run this program now, bb TCP client, and you can see that this connected over here. And if I do hello world, you'll see that this received hello world and it sent it back. This is a test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so that's it. It works. The client and the TCP all gel together, and it's done in virtually. Let me just try and get this back up here. What do we have here? It's in. Oh dear. Well, that crashed. I love these Linux videos. Let me go back to the client here. Okay, let me do a recap. Well, everything's back, so that's good. Okay, so we have all our includes up the top here for all the networking functionality. What do? We created a socket. We created a hint structure, and we populated that. The hint structure, of course, points to the server we want to connect to. So if your IP address and port number is different, you're going to have to change them. We then connect to the server using this hint structure, and we refer to that connection using our socket. So that binds our socket with our communication line there. So that socket ID, whatever that socket ID is, it doesn't really matter. That is the link to our server. So all our communication, either sending to the server or receiving from the server, goes through that file descriptor, that socket there. Then we have our our while loop, or do while loop in this case, and we prompt the user for a piece of text. We then try and send that text to the server, and we wait for a response. And then once we get the response, we then print out, what the response was. We could also say if bytes received equals -1. Cout, there was an error getting a response from server. That there, else that there, which is probably a little bit better, because what we actually want to do is not crash your program if something bad happens. So if there's an error, then we just want to say, oh, there's an error, and then just move on to the next thing. Although otherwise we want to display the buffer. And this one here is just a nice way of cutting down that buffer. I mean, you could just display the buffer, I suppose, but this is a bit more C++-y. And then finally, when you press the Control C, then you close the connection, and then that drops to the other side. In fact, I can show you that just now. So if I go to the terminal here and then say goodbye, and then press Control C, you can see that both services shut down. So goodbye, the client disconnected, and this one returns back to the prompt. So that's that. So that's that. That's the second Linux video that I've done. I'd like to say I'm getting better at them, but but I'm not. I seem to be fighting with Linux more than anything else. At least I've got full screen now, which is a sort of benefit, I guess. Yeah, there was some command line madness to get that working too. Anyway, if you liked this video, if you found it useful, then give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, then thumbs down. Please let me know either way what you liked, what you didn't like in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Please feel free to share this on social media, Facebook, YouTube, I guess. What's the other ones? Twitter, Mastodon, whatever you want to do, share this video. If you haven't subscribed, then please feel free to subscribe, but there's obviously no obligation for you to do that. And I will catch you in the next time. Thank you all very much for watching. Bye-bye.